U.S. immigration judge in Louisiana, ruled on April 11th that the U.S. President Donald Trump's administration can proceed with deportation proceedings against Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil, a legal permanent U.S. resident, citing his role in leading last year's pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia University. Assistant Chief Immigration Judge Jamie Cummins ruled that Khalil can be deported, saying that the U.S. government met its burden of proof to remove him. The decision came after the federal government submitted evidence to the court on April 9th, including a memo from Secretary of State Marco Rubio alleging Khalil is deportable because of his beliefs, statements, or associations that would compromise U.S. foreign policy interests. Coleman said that she did not have the authority to overrule the U.S. Secretary of State. The judge denied a motion by Khalil's lawyers to subpoena Rubio and questioned him about the reasonable grounds he had for his determination under the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 to the law, also known as the McCarran-Walter Act, governs immigration to and citizenship in the United States, citing the 1952 law. Trump appointed U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio determined last month that Khalil could harm American foreign policy interests and should be deported for his otherwise lawful speech and activism. The judge's decision came after a combative 90-minute hearing held in a court located inside the Louisiana jail complex for immigrants surrounded by double fence, razor wire run by private government contractors. Carlisle's attorneys said the judge's decision was solely based on Rubio's memo, which contained no allegations of criminal activity and was a violation of the graduate's constitutional right to free speech. That sets a harmful precedent. Carlisle's legal team said at a press conference following the hearing on April 11th. Despite the government's failure to prove that Mahmoud broke any law, the court has decided that lawful permanent residents can have their status revoked for pro-Palestine advocacy. This is a blatant violation of the First Amendment and a dangerous precedent for anyone who believes in free speech and political expression. At the end of court's hearing as Commons adjourned, Carlisle leaned forward, asking to address the court. Commons hesitated, then agreed. Carlisle told the court that he hasn't been granted due process rights and fundamental fairness. I would like to quote what you said last time, that there's nothing that's more important to this court than due process, rights, and fundamental fairness. Clearly, what we witnessed today, neither of these principles were present today or in this whole process. This is exactly why the Trump administration has sent me to this court 1,000 miles away from my family. I just hope that the urgency that you've deemed fit for me is afforded to the hundreds of others who have been here without hearing for months. Carlisle was a prominent figure in the pro-Palestinian student protest movement that rocked Columbia's New York City campus last year. He was arrested in New York City on March 8, over a month after Trump took oath as President of the United States. For now, Khalil remains in the Louisiana jail, where federal authorities transferred him after his arrest at his Columbia University apartment building, some 30 kilometers away. Coleman's gave Carlisle's lawyers until April 23rd to apply for relief before she considers whether to issue a deportation order. An immigration judge can rule that a migrant cannot be deported because of possible persecution in a home country, among other limited grounds. In a separate case in New Jersey, U.S. District Judge Michael Fabius has blocked deportation. While he considers Khalil's claim that his arrest was made in violation of the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment protections for freedom of speech, the ruling by the LaSalle Immigration Court's judge was not a final determination of Khalil's fate, but it represented a significant victory for the Republican president in his efforts to deport foreign pro-Palestinian students who were in the United States legally, and, like Khalil, have not been charged with any crime. A federal judge ordered the Trump administration on April 11th to provide her with daily updates on its efforts to return a Maryland man who was wrongly deported to El Salvador. The federal judge said it was extremely troubling that the Trump administration failed to comply with her court order to provide details on the status of a Maryland resident. U.S. District Judge Paul Lajeunesse demanded at a hearing that the administration identify the whereabouts of Marta Abrego Garcia, who was sent to El Salvador on March 15th, despite an order protecting him from deportation, and update her daily on its efforts to secure his return. The record as it stands is despite this court's clear directive. Your clients have done nothing to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia. You aren't providing anything on the record about this. So based on the record, you've done nothing. Following the judge's court order, the attorney for Garcia said on April 11th that their team is not going to accept the government's generic and unsubstantiated assertions that they're working on this, after the Supreme Court issued that order. The district judge issued a further order clarifying her ruling and explaining that the government needs to take all steps reasonable to facilitate the return of Mr. Garcia to the United States, and that in the meanwhile, it needs to provide the court with information. For the second time, in this case, they sent a lawyer into court who has had no answers that he explained that his clients, the government, have chosen not to give him any information, not to give him any evidence. And the district judge appropriately was not willing to accept their vague and unsubstantiated assertions that "don't worry, Judge, we'll take care of this all in due course." The government attorney did say that they intend to comply with the order and bring him back. That's the bare minimum. They should have done that already. They've had plenty of time between the Supreme Court's order early yesterday evening. And now you should be here in the United States. It's a 5-hour flight. Yes. Simon Sandoval Munchenberg called the government attorney's inability to name the current whereabouts of his client shocking. Yeah, that was the most shocking thing of all, that the attorney for the government wasn't even prepared to answer the question. Where is Kilmer of Rico today, and what is his custodial status? I was very dismayed and disheartened by the fact that they wouldn't answer such a straightforward question. The hearing came a day after the U.S. Supreme Court upheld Genesis' order directing the administration to facilitate and effectuate Abrego Garcia's return, but said the term effectuate was unclear and might exceed the court's authority. Meanwhile, President Trump on April 11th said that his administration would bring Abrego Garcia back if the Supreme Court directed it to one that was not there. You present Ms. 13. This is the one that they've set these things up and nobody's watching and researching. And I only know, but I don't know what's going on. But if the Supreme Court said, bring somebody back out with you, and I respect the Supreme Court and the lower court judge as well, he's been asking for a lot of things that we're spending every respect that the Supreme Court.s I'm going to talk about first in this case. But if they bring it back, as the Trump administration has acknowledged, Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran migrant who is living in Maryland and has had a work permit since 2019, was deported by mistake, but it has said it cannot immediately bring him back, and that diplomatic relations cannot operate at the speed with which the courts are demanding.
Is that the one that was not Trent de Arauco, but he was MS-13?
Just the one that they've said needs to come back.
No, but was he MS-13? Because I only know about that. I don't know which one, but if the Supreme Court said bring somebody back, I would do that. I respect the Supreme Court.
And the lower court judge as well. He's been asking for
I'm not talking about the lower court. I have great respect for the Supreme Court. So I'm not totally well versed as to the specific case, but if they said to bring him back, I would tell them to bring him back.
Abrego Garcia was detained by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers on March 12th and questioned about alleged gang affiliation. He was deported on March 15th on one of 3 high-profile deportation flights to El Salvador that also included alleged Venezuelan gang members, many of whom have no criminal records. The Trump administration's approach to immigration has taken an administrative turn, with new reports revealing efforts to reflect that stance in official government records, raising concerns among advocates about the broader impact on immigrant communities. The Department of Homeland Security requested the Social Security Administration to classify more than 6,300 living immigrants, as did canceling their Social Security numbers and effectively wiping out their ability to work or receive benefits in an effort to get them to leave the country, The Guardian reported, quoting DHS official with knowledge of the decision. According to the New York Times, the administration has added those names to the death master file, claiming those immigrants are convicted criminals and suspected terrorists. The officials said stripping the immigrants of their Social Security numbers will cut them off from many financial services and encourage them to self-deport and abandon the U.S. for their birth countries.